אור זרוע לצדיק ולישרי לב שמחה. 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 אור זרוע לצדיק ולישרי לב שמחה.
In his collection of stories on the high holidays, Sipurei Yom HaKippurim, Shai Agnon, the towering figure of modern Hebrew literature, makes repeated use of the symbol of the talit, the prayer shawl that Jews wear every day, but only on one evening of the year, Kol Nidrei, tonight. Our protagonist of the story sits at home before services, unable to decide which of his two talitot to wear. Like some of us, he owns more than one. The first he received as part of an inheritance. His father-in-law was a great scholar, and he had an extraordinary collection of Sfarim, of ancient books. When his father-in-law died, the books were divided up by the children. One special book was sent to him and was wrapped in a tallis. The tallis represented the past, the old world, the voices of his predecessors. The second tallis, though, was very different. He had purchased this one for himself. When he made Aliyah to Israel, he bought a new tallis. He had moved to a neighborhood full of Hasidim, and whatever type of tallis they wore, he wanted to have the same kind to fit in. The second tallis represented everything he hoped for. It was his unrealized future. So with the two talitot in front of him, the story unfolds. Our man conducts an internal debate on which one he should wear to synagogue that evening. The new one, the one that represents the future, symbolic of the life he wants, or the old one that signifies his past, not only his father-in-law, but the learning of the old world, an almost mythical yesteryear that he sought to embrace. He agonizes, he deliberates, in anguish, measuring the merits of each one. Finally, unable to decide, he lays them both out, he closes his eyes, and he takes whichever one he took, and he runs to shul. But he arrives to an empty sanctuary. Services are over. His deliberations caused him to miss a critical moment. His inability to decide prevented him from arriving at all. Agnon writes, "There I was like an apothecary, so long working, mixing powders for a drug that in the meantime, the patient dies." Friends, we've made it on time. We're here in the sanctuary on Kol Nidrei evening wearing our talitot. But the question, the path we still must choose, our commitments to the past, our aspirations for the future, to return to the people we once were, or perhaps the people that we seek to be. Inertia is not an option. The quality of our lives hangs in the balance. What shall we choose? What path shall we take? The task of the day is upon us. We dare not be late. We rise, Bishiva Shalmala, page 204. The ark is open.
בישיבה של המעלה ובישיבה של המטה על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם עבריינים. על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל, בישיבה של מעלה ובישיבה של מטה, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם עבריינים. בישיבה של מעלה ובישיבה של מטה, על דעת המקום ועל דעת הקהל, אנו מתירים להתפלל עם עבריינים.
Page 205, Kol Nidrei.
Kol Nidrei v'sarei v'charamei v'kunamei v'chinuhei v'chinusei בטלים ומבוטלים.
Page 205 together. All vows, renunciations, bans, oaths, formulas of obligation, pledges and promises that we vow or promise to ourselves and to God from this Yom Kippur to the next, may it approach us for good, we hereby retract. May they all be undone, repealed, canceled, voided, annulled, and regarded as neither valid nor binding. Our vows shall not be considered vows, our renunciations shall not be considered renunciations, and our promises shall not be considered promises. Page 205, Kol Nidrei.
בטלים ומבוטלים, לשרירים ולקיימים, נדרנה שבועת ענה ושבועת ענה ושבועת
Let's read the top left corner on page 204 together. Top left on 204. All the vows on our lips, the burdens in our hearts, the pent-up regrets about which we brooded and spoke through prayers without end on last Atonement Day did not change our way of life, did not bring deliverance in the year that has gone. From mountain peaks of fervor we fell to common ways at the close of the fast. Will you hear our regret? Will you open our prison, release us from shackles of habit? Will you accept our prayers, forgive our wrongs, though we sin again and again? In moments of weakness, we do not remember promises of Atonement Day. Recall that we easily forget. Take only our heart's intent. Forgive us, pardon us. Page 205, Kol Nidrei.
בטלין ומבוטלין, בטלין ומבוטלין, לשרירים ולקיימים, ולקיימים, סלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם ונסלח לכל הדת בני ישראל ולגר הגר בתוכם כי לכל העם בשגגה נסלח לכל סלח נא לעוונם הזה כגודל חסדך וכאשר נסעת לעם הזה ממצרים ועד הנה ושם נאמר ויאמר אדוני ויאמר אדוני ויאמר אדוני ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם
We remain standing even as the ark is closed. The Mariv service, page 207, Baruch Hu.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
We may be seated.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בדברו מעריב ערבים. הוא מעביר יום ומביא לילה ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני המריב ערבים.
You have loved your people, the house of Israel, with infinite love. You taught us Torah and mitzvot, statutes and laws. Therefore, Adonai our God, as we lie down, as we rise up, we shall think of your laws and speak of them, rejoicing in your words of Torah and your mitzvot forever and ever. Ahavat Olam, page 208.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו לימדת אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת על כן אדוני נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת אהבת עולם עמך אהבת כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו והם נגי יומם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת
208, Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchotav.
We may be seated, chanting together with the cantor.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך.
Continuing silently with our meditations through the bottom of page 209.
והיה אם שמוע תשמעו להם מצוות אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
Continuing through the middle of page 210, the Song of the Sea, as the Israelites were liberated for their bondage into freedom. Middle of page 210.
ומלאכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל, לחנו שירה. בשמחה רבה ואמרו עולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש. מלכותך ראו בניך בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים, זה עליינו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך. נאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלנו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
In just a moment, we will chant Hashkivenu with the cantor, a prayer that asks for peace, security, a world filled with God's presence. I want to introduce it by way of inviting you, not now, but after Yom Kippur, to go online and to Google Scotland and Cosgrove. Because at the top of the list, you'll find an organization in Scotland called Cosgrove Care, same last name as yours truly. a social service organization whose sole purpose is to provide support, programming, and long-term living for Scottish citizens of all backgrounds who have physical and cognitive needs. A wonderful organization built on principles of respect, integrity, and compassion. It's autism accredited. It's there for anybody who needs it. What you won't see on the website, what's not public, which I'm going to share with you now, is a story of the founding of Cosgrove Care. My grandfather, of blessed memory, as many know, was a congregational rabbi in Glasgow, Scotland, until his passing in 1973. While I never knew him, I have spoken of him often, and were this to be therapy, which this Bema and Sanctuary kind of is for me, my whole career is a roundabout way of getting to know a man that I never knew. So, as the story goes, sometime in the 1950s, the first Rabbi Cosgrove was going about his business, doing what rabbis do, the hatchings, matchings, and dispatchings of clergy life, when a woman named Miss Hill called him up filled with anxiety. A Jewish woman, but not a member of my grandfather's congregation, Miss Hill shared her anguished story of what it was to raise her son, and the language of that time was mentally handicapped without any support from the community, never mind the Jewish community. At the time, and perhaps still at this time, to have a child with differentiated needs was not something one spoke about. There was a stigma. It was a matter of shame. You didn't publicize it. Miss Hill never shared her story. My grandfather listened carefully, and I imagine compassionately, and thought to himself the following thought: how many Miss Hills could there be in Scotland, parents with children with differentiated needs? There wasn't Facebook at the time, so my grandfather wrote a letter to the local paper asking if there were other Miss Hills, anyone who had ever felt in need of support, and if so, they should contact my grandfather. And from that letter came a flood of responses. People started meeting other people, stories were shared, the shame was lifted, the community was mobilized, the Jewish Association for the Mentally Handicapped was founded, government support started to arrive, a long-term care facility was funded and built. And while I don't have all the details, some 50 years after my grandfather's passing, it's all named in memory of the guy who got it started, my grandfather. And while there are many, many lessons to be derived from this story about building an inclusive community, about legacy, about leadership, this evening, at this moment, before Hashkivenu, I find my thinking about Miss Hill, or more precisely, the Miss Hills, as it were, of our community in our time. The people who are here in this congregation, or more likely not here in this congregation, who live with pain, who suffer in silence. It could be health, it could be long-term care for a family member, it could be financial setback, it could be a broken relationship, a betrayal, addiction. There's no end to the manner by which a human soul can be bruised and battered. And I think that however painful that bruise must be, how much more painful it is when it's felt alone, when you think you are the only one. Surely there is someone else going through what I'm going through. If nothing else, a synagogue should be a sanctuary, a place to speak openly and seek support, to mobilize resources, and make sure that while we can't solve every problem, no person should ever think that they are alone, that in our brokenness, we can aspire for shlemut, for wholeness, for the whole community. So I never knew my grandfather, but I know the kind of rabbi I aspire to be. I know the kind of community it is I seek to build, a place where the human condition, in all its varieties and frailties, has a home, a sukkot shalom, a canopy of peace, blessed by God, welcoming all those seeking entry in all of their humanity. Hashkivenu can be found on page 211.
Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu, Leshalom. לשלום, לשלום. השכיבנו, השכיבנו, השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו, לשלום, לשלום, לשלום. והעמידנו מלכנו לחיים, ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך, ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום, לחיים ולשלום, מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל
When we opened the service this evening, you saw certain individuals holding the Sifrei Torah. These individuals are the past and present leaders of our community, those who have given of the most valuable resource of all, their time, their leadership, towards making our community what it is. We thank them with the greatest honor we have that they should hold the Sifrei Torah at Kol Nidrei. And we express our thanks as a community to them and the generations before who have led our community with distinction. This past summer, we transitioned from one chairman, Mark Becker, to a new chairman, Mark First. It keeps it easy for rabbis, we just call them Mark. The magic of Park Avenue Synagogue happens by way of the leadership and the partnership between the staff, the community, underneath our chairman and the board and officers that lead us. It's a great pleasure in the company of his beloved wife Rachel, Adam and Alyssa, as well as Sandy, his mother, I believe, who is here this evening to introduce to you, perhaps for the first time, our chairman, Mark First, for words of greeting on Kol Nidrei.
And good Yontif, everyone. So this is my first Kol Nidrei address to the community as chairman, as the rabbi mentioned. And while I do know many of you, I wanted to take a minute to introduce myself to those who may not know me. My name is Mark First, and my wife Rachel and I have been members of Park Avenue Synagogue for more than 27 years. PAS is and has been a most important part of our lives. Our children, Alyssa and Adam, have grown up here. We've davened, we've traveled, we've studied, we've laughed, we've cried together with this community and found some of our closest friends here at PAS. Because of what PAS has done for our family, first Rachel, and now I have committed our time in lay leadership positions, trying to make PAS even better, hoping it can mean as much for others as it has meant for us. What many of my friends might not even know is that when I was young, I was intrigued and some might say obsessed by the performance of magic. I performed at all kinds of events, and yes, I even had two working doves by the name of Mork and Mindy. Okay, now that I've dated myself, what matters most in magic is the effect, what people see, how they feel, and what they experience. And what makes something magic versus any other performance art is accomplishing something that does not seem possible, based on a secret that's hidden. But once you know the secret, then it's probably not magic or magical. Magicians want you to focus on the effect, but I know all we really care about is, how's it done? Now, as an adult, I no longer spend time thinking about the performance of magic, but rather, and often in the context as an investor, about the magic that makes for great organizations, great institutions, and highly effective teams. And recently, this includes trying to understand the magic of PAS. Park Avenue Synagogue is thriving, which is no small task in light of the many challenges out there. Declining interest in religion, intermarriage, changing consumer trends driven by technology, general economic and New York-specific factors, as well as a changing employee landscape, just to name a few. So what is the magic of PAS? Well, Rabbi Cosgrove often describes it as the partnership between the lay leadership and the professional staff. And while it's probably not a great idea to disagree with the rabbi, especially when he's sitting right behind me in front of the congregation, I don't think his answer is entirely complete. Where we do agree is the lay leadership is a critical component of our success. We owe a great deal of gratitude to the past chairpersons, many of whom you saw earlier tonight, and their officer groups for leadership over the past decades, getting us to this point. And I am most grateful to my officer partners and friends over the past 4 years, Natalie Barth, Mark Hirsch, Lizzie Marcus, Nan Rubin, Craig Solomon, Amy Steiner, and my predecessor, dear friend, and total mensch, Mark Becker. And I'm also fortunate to have another terrific group of officer partners for the coming years, Erica Friedman, Paula Gandel, Lauren Klein, Melissa Raskin, Stephanie Katz-Rothman, Andrew Siegel, and our president, Lizzie Marcus. To my partners past and present, thank you for all that you have done and will do on behalf of this beloved institution. And while the officers have and do give tirelessly of their time, I am remiss not to mention our extended board of trustees, as well as the hundreds of other volunteers and lay leaders working across more than 50 committees that extend our reach and capabilities. We're grateful to our many congregants who've advised on countless projects. Most recently, look around, our Sanctuary Refresh Project, how to navigate the pandemic, and how to be present and thrive online. Thank you. Beyond lay leaders, I view synagogue leadership comprised of 3 pillars. There's foundation, there's programming, and there's community. First, foundation, which sounds like it should be about our beautiful buildings, but is at its core about our people. We are blessed to have the best clergy team of any synagogue anywhere. We are thankful for Rabbi Cosgrove for his vision, his thought leadership, and for guiding us from the traditions of the past to those of tomorrow. We thank Cantor Schwartz for inspiring us through his spiritual prayers and songs, as well as his musical leadership and innovation. Rabbi Zuckerman's compassion and teachings span all corners of this institution. Cantor Davis and Cantor Michaely's warmth and uplifting spirit comfort us week in and week out. Our Rabbi to-be Kornsgold brings youth and energy to the clergy suite, and we recently welcomed Rabbi Zosmer, formerly Galko, back to Park Avenue. It's amazing to see how much she's grown and developed as a rabbi these past several years. I give credit to her being an intern here at Park Avenue Synagogue. Our team of ordained clergy extends from the bima to the classroom. Our programming and educational leadership includes Rabbi Laurie Kaufman, Rabbi Bradley Thompson, and Cantor Ariel Reisner. And overseeing everything else in this institution is our executive director, Valerie Russo. Valerie, we cannot thank you enough for your guidance and leadership over these past 18 months through what has been a most challenging time to be leading any institution, and a huge amount of gratitude to the entire PAS staff. From a programming perspective, PAS did not miss a beat from the time we became entirely virtual in March 2020 until today when we are hybrid. To be clear, we will not stop our online presence. It has become a critical part of who we are, both for our members who can now participate from wherever they are, as well as for the thousands of others who log in each week to experience the PAS brand of Judaism that we all cherish. But in spite of online access, we still believe that the in-person experience will always be more spiritual and bring greater meaning and joy than a purely digital one. We ended spring with the most successful gala where more than 500 members attended, and a concert based on the music of Debbie Friedman that filled the sanctuary air and pews. Our travel program is back, And our theme for this fall is Yachad, together. We asked you to fill our house for these high holidays, and based on Rosh Hashanah attendance and looking around today, you clearly did. There's a complete listing of everything on our website. We have weekly emails. I promise you there is something for everyone. Which brings me to the final component of explaining the magic. We, the PAS community. It has been said that people initially come to Park Avenue for the clergy, the prayer, and the programming, but stay because of their fellow members. The true value of the PAS community reaches far beyond the individual relationships one might have with the synagogue institution or any individual clergy member. The magic of the community is, for example, seeing 60 young adults socializing on the roof while over 100 people in the third floor chapel are buzzing, enjoying dinner at a congregational school event, all following a Friday evening Shabbat service that had more than 300 people in this room and hundreds more online. That is an example of the magic of PAS. So what do I see over time? Well, when I became chairman, it was a bit daunting to be in charge and responsible for a 140-year-old institution. And my first thought was, well, try not to mess it up. And then I thought perhaps it was okay to keep doing the same thing we're doing because, well, it seems to be working. But if you don't evolve and adapt with the times, you will go backwards. And so my conclusion is we need to move forward, kadima. We need to do so by balancing the tradition, the old and the familiar, with the new, the current, and the exciting. We need to try new things, not being afraid to fail and learn, and all along balancing the short-term needs and desires of our members with the long-term viability of the institution. So, while it's early in the next era of leadership, we do anticipate making progress and innovating in each of our foundation, our programming, and our community. And the officers and I promise that we will work hard to protect and grow the synagogue. And in exchange, I have 3 things to ask of each of you tonight, which actually reminds me of a story of some guy named Goldstein. Goldstein was walking down the beach one day when he stumbled upon a magical lamp, and when he rubbed it, of course, a genie appeared. The genie told Goldstein he'd grant him 1 wish, but he had to pick from 3 choices. Goldstein could be either the richest man in the world, the most popular man in the world, or the wisest man in the world. Goldstein said, well, we all know that money does not bring happiness, and that popularity just makes you a slave to the whims of others. But wisdom is everlasting. I want to be the wisest man in the world, said Goldstein. And with a poof of smoke, suddenly Goldstein's face took on a very serious look. He sat down, he rubbed his chin and thought. He turned to the genie and said, I should have taken the money. So my 3 wishes for you in the coming year are, first, support. This is a Kol Nidrei appeal, so you should not be surprised. Okay, we can't do all that we do without your generosity and support. In fact, the only way we can have the amazing facilities, programs, and teams that we do is through your donations. Dues alone are not enough. You can support us here tonight when the ushers pass through the aisles, or after the holiday online by clicking on the donate button on our website. Yes, we will take your wisdom, we will take your friendship, but we'll take the money too. Support. Second, engage. Decide what is interesting and important to you and engage with PAS. Come to a lecture, take a class, engage in prayer, do a mitzvah through our Tikkun Olam initiatives, visit the sick, travel. I could go on. You can engage in person, you can engage online. Please just engage. And third, connect. Access the magic that occurs directly between our members. Reach out to an old friend, welcome a new friend, introduce yourself to somebody you don't know, make connections. Because while the one-on-one bonds are meaningful and strong, the network of many-to-many bonds are even stronger and more meaningful. So what is the secret to the magic of PAS? Well, I know the secret's about the combination of our professional staff, our leadership, and our community. And yet, unlike watching a magic performance where when you know the secret, you know how it works, in this case, I know the secret, but still have no idea how the magic happens. It just does. And what I also know is that the more we support and engage and connect, the more magical the PAS community will become. So on behalf of the officers and board of trustees of our synagogue, I wish everyone a Shana Tova, Mitucha, a good and sweet year, Gamor Chatima Tova. I pray that you all and your families are all written into the book of life for a year of health, happiness, peace, prosperity, and magic. Toda Rabbah.
Shikach. Beautiful. Mark, first, thank you so much for your work, for your wisdom, for the example of your leadership. We are all so excited about the years ahead. Yasher koach to you. The ushers will be coming through the aisles, so anyone can hand in the bendy card so you can make your donation now, or of course online following, or someone will call you, I am sure. Page 212. Please rise. On this day, atonement shall be made for you to purify you from transgressions. At the presence of Adonai, you shall be pure. Ki vayom hazeh.
כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם לפני אדוני תטהרו יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה
Amen.
ועל מה דיברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תוש בחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Our silent Amidah begins on page 213. It continues through 221. It's a lot of Hebrew. It's a lot of English. We're going to do it 5 times over the next 24 hours. For me, whereas I try to get all the words in, it's also the words on my heart. And a meditation I do, which I invite you to try, is to think of your life in concentric circles. Your person, your family, your community, perhaps your workplace, what have you. We all have different circles. And to focus in on each aspect of our lives, on each Amidah, so we can arrive at tomorrow evening having done a full audit of the soul. So take your time, go at your own pace. You may be seated as you conclude page 213 through page 221.
who knows pain and all its parts, who restores all broken hearts, forms darkness and light, creator of peace and strife, who sits on the judgment throne, clothed in mercy that alone, who sees all and knows, yet forgives and lets go. Just who will heal my broken heart when I fall apart? One that I long for, like an ocean with no shore. Will you tell my soul who will make me whole, and promise that my heart won't break anymore? היה הווה ויהיה, מימי מיתו מחיה, פותח ידיים, מצמיח כנפיים, ומי ירפא ליבי אל מימי מתגעגע כמו ים שאין לו חוף. רק תגיד לי מי יחבק אותי ויבטיח שאני לא אכנע בסוף, שאני לא אכנע בסוף. Just who will heal my broken heart when I fall apart? One that I long for, like an ocean with no shore. Will you tell my soul who will make me whole, and promise that my heart won't break anymore? My heart won't break anymore.
Good Yontef. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the publication of F. Scott Fitzgerald's short story, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. The story is brief enough, but if you want to do it on the cheap and enjoy the added bonus of 2 hours alone with Brad Pitt, then you can watch the 2008 film adaptation. Born into antebellum Baltimore, Benjamin arrives into the world as a man somewhere in his 70s, fully formed, speaking, and bearded gray. At 5, he's sent to kindergarten, but being an older man, he keeps falling asleep in school. At 18, he tries to enroll in college at Yale, but's rejected by the admissions officers who believe this middle-aged man is mocking him. Benjamin reaches his prime in his 20s and takes over his father's business, doubles it in size, gets married, fathers a son, and at the height of his powers enlists in the Spanish-American War to emerge as a decorated war hero. Hitting 50, Benjamin, now presenting as a man in his 20s, finally goes to college, enrolling at Harvard to play football, if for no other reason than to exact his revenge on Yale's football team for having rejected him years earlier. As Benjamin enters his teens, he realizes he can no longer compete with the men of college ball, nor, for that matter, understand the content of his college classes. Benjamin returns home to his son, who is now older than his father and embarrassed by him. Younger and younger, Benjamin grows, the clock turning backwards into adolescence, into childhood, into infancy, and then, as the story closes, into a dark nothingness. Aside from its compact elegance, the appeal of Fitzgerald's story is that it serves as a meditation on the universally shared but often uncomfortable subject of aging. Fitzgerald credits the idea of the book to Mark Twain's comment that it is a pity that the best part of life comes at the beginning and the worst at the end. His book is a journey through an imagined alternative. Were we to start old and grow young, an option that Fitzgerald entertains but ultimately rejects? In other words, while we can all opine as to whether youth is or isn't wasted on the young, the direction of life is what it is, and the alternatives, fictional included, are not much better. To live forever would deprive life of its meaning. As Chaim Potok wrote in My Name is Asher Lev, something that is yours forever is never precious. Nor, for that matter, is it an option to stop time. In the words of Golda Meir, old age is like an airplane flying in a storm. Once you're in it, there's nothing you can do. Imperfect as it is, we're left with the option we have. We age, a state of being that comes with a built-in paradox. On the one hand, growing old is a thing we desire most, far better than the alternative. And yet, it is the frailties that come with aging that are the very things we fear most in life. Ever since the Garden of Eden, when the first couple ate from the tree of knowledge but not from the tree of life, this paradox has been baked into the human condition, a condition for which we have an abundance of tools with which to cope. The most common path, reinforced by the way secular culture valorizes youth, strength, and beauty, is to cover up the signs of aging as they appear in our hair, on our bodies, and in our faces, a form of deniable as understandable as it is odd, given the fact that aging is the only thing we can all count on. Last year, the industry of anti-aging products in our country estimated at some $60 billion and growing at 5% each year. Other people, the don't ever grow up people, dig in their heels at the sight of gray hair, believing that the effects of aging can somehow be halted by way of desperate assertions of adolescence, a Harley Davidson, a sports car, or an earring. In my mind, the safest and cheapest of all the options. The most common coping mechanism, no doubt, of course, is humor. Growing old is a backbone of more jokes than can be counted. We know the story of Sadie and Abe, who are visited on their 60th birthday by a fairy godmother who grants them each one wish. Sadie asks that her lifetime dream be fulfilled, to travel the world, and a wave of the wand, poof, Sadie's holding cruise tickets in her hand. The fairy godmother turns to Abe, who pauses and in a moment of daring says, "I'd like to be married to a woman 30 years younger than me." The fairy godmother waves her wand, poof, Abe is now 90. Humor, I'm glad the chairman didn't use that one. Humor is our response to that which is both painful and unavoidable. It was the famed novelist Agatha Christie who was asked what it was like to be married to a prominent archaeologist, to which she responded, "It's wonderful. The older I get, the more interested he is in me." The jokes may be Jewish or not, the jokes may be gendered or not, but the jokes, like all humor, are coping mechanisms to address the fact and the fear and the blessing of growing old. Because while many people, hopefully, look to each chapter of life as an opportunity for a new mission, what Arthur Brooks calls finding our second curve, longevity necessarily brings with it a cascade of losses. Most obviously, there are limitations on one's physical capacities, the frustrating realization that one simply cannot do what one once could. There are limitations on one's cognitive capacities, a series of reversions in energy, attention, and memory. COVID has done no favors to the elderly. First, foremost, and tragically, the loss of life. But COVID has also taken the kishkas out of the living, of all ages, but especially the aged. Over these past years, as the world has been turned upside down, millions of seniors have been deprived of the hard-earned and long-anticipated victory lap that was their due: travel, time with grandchildren, time with siblings, and otherwise. It's not just that the physical movement of seniors was circumscribed, but social circles as well, with every passing year an awareness that theirs is a journey shared by fewer and fewer. Ask any person between the ages of 75 and 105. Each one carries a list of friends: Gloria, Susie, Ruby, Dee Dee, Rowan, no longer of this world. The death of a confidant, the death of a part of one's very being. I've always been struck by that scene towards the end of the book of Genesis, when the patriarch Jacob, finally reunited with his son Joseph, is brought by Joseph to meet with Pharaoh. The two patriarchs, Egyptian and Israelite, greet each other, and Pharaoh inquires of Jacob, "How many are the years of your life?" Jacob responds, "The years of my sojourn are 130. Few and hard have been my years, and they do not measure up to the years of my father." Jacob has fathered a nation. He's been reunited with his children. He achieved a length of years that is, well, biblical in proportion, and yet when asked, his years are poor in quantity, quality, in absolute terms, and relative, certainly, to those of his forefathers. Whatever the facts are of Jacob's life, he suffers from a form of depression, an inability to see the good, perseverating on the bad. Acutely aware of his impending mortality, he sees only the diminished road ahead, not the extraordinary road traveled. Jacob's mindset, a window into the challenges of what it is to grow old. But the greatest price that comes with the privilege of longevity is not, I believe, a loss that can be explained by way of biology or physiology. We may not be happy about it, but intellectually we know that nobody, not even Moses, who died at 120 with eyes undimmed, ever reaches the promised land. Difficult as the fact of diminished physical and cognitive capacity may be, the real difficulty, I think, is the diminished role the elderly perceive themselves to have in this world. The emptiness felt by those who were once at the center of it all, at work, at home, in the community, the people around whom the universe once revolved and relied, whose every minute counted, and now see themselves as diminished in significance, in consequence, and in worth. Not just a loss of independence, but a fear that with senescence comes obsolescence, that everybody who has moved on and left them behind. Men and women who have built businesses, families, entire universes, who nurtured, counseled, and guided so many for so long, and now in their twilight years are shunted aside. And it's this fear of being cast aside, that takes center stage on Yom Kippur. In every service of Yom Kippur, we name the fear before God. Shema kolenu, hear our voice. Al tashlichenu la'et zikna, do not cast us off in old age. Kichlot kochenu al tazvenu, when our strength fails, do not forsake us. It is, I believe, the most searing confession of this sacred day. We miss the point if we believe that Yom Kippur is a day merely to confront the fact of our mortality, who will live and who will die. Yom Kippur is a day that we give heed to the voice, the tortured cry, the tears and the fears of those who stand before the dying of the light. It's a feeling perhaps best expressed by the late children's poet Shel Silverstein, who commented on Shema Kolenu by way of a dialogue. Imagine between a young boy and an old man. Said the little boy, "Sometimes I drop my spoon." Said the old man, "I do that too." The little boy whispered, "Sometimes I wet my pants." "I do that too," said the old man. Said the little boy, "I often cry." The old man nodded. "So do I." "But worst of all," said the boy, "it seems to me that grown-ups don't pay any attention to me." And he felt the warmth of the wrinkled old hand. "I know what you mean," said the old man. Al tashlichenu la'et zikna. Do not cast us off in old age. Not the fear of death, not the fear of growing old, but the fear that in our old age we are ignored, abandoned, and pronounced obsolete. And it's here at this point in the sermon that I need to pause. Pause to name something aloud that many in this room are no doubt thinking. I am well aware that there are many, perhaps half the people in this room, who are older than me. People who might be thinking, "Elliot, it's nice that you're acknowledging us. Thank you. And your gray hair, Elliot, tatale, it's sweet." But what do you know? What do you really know about growing old? Elliot, you have the gift of living parents. May they live to 120. But I've cared for, buried, and mourned my own. What business do you have to speak of your elders, to your elders about the fear of aging, of being cast off, about the price that comes with the privilege of longevity? These are the right questions to ask, questions that are not only fair, and stay with me, precisely the point. Because trained though I am as a pastor, I'm keenly aware of the limitations of my life experience. Attuned as I may be to the fragile nature of the human condition, neither I nor anyone for that matter can fully address the biological or theological questions surrounding human mortality, which is why I need to clarify, I need to specify that while I might be speaking about my parents' generation, my intended listener is my generation and the generations to come. Because if the diagnosis of the day involves naming the existential loneliness that accompanies growing old, of the adverse consequences of societal attitudes towards the elderly, then it is the members of my generation who must hear that it is they, that it is we, who hold the corrective, the antidote, if you will, to that very state of affairs. Let me explain. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, in a 1961 address at the White House Conference on Aging, gave voice to the existential fear of being useless to and rejected by family and society. The test of a people, he taught, is how it behaves towards the old. As a Jewish people, the obligation that one generation has to the prior generation of filial piety sits front and center. You don't need to look very far. It's number 5 of the 10 Commandments. Kabed et avicha v'et imecha, honor thy father and mother. A commandment whose very placement is significant in that it's grouped with the first 5 God-centered commandments, as if to say that to honor a parent is equivalent to honoring God. What does it mean to honor one's parents? For starters, it involves not sitting in their place, not contradicting them in public, providing them with food and drink, with shelter and medical care. Some of the most colorful stories of all of rabbinic literature describe the heroic lengths, the sacrifices in time, finance, and ego made by Talmudic personalities in order to honor their parents, a compendium of filial one-upmanship that every Jewish mother would enjoy. In truth, we should all read the literature, because it includes textured discussions about matters ranging from who pays for elder care, how to care for parents with dementia, at what point can one move a parent into group living, what to do if there are conflicts between siblings or spouses regarding care for parents or in-laws, and even the degree to which one should or should not honor an abusive parent. To honor one's parent, incidentally, is a commandment, like tzedakah, that has nothing to do with whether you want to do it or not. We are not told to love our parents like we are told to love our neighbor. The commandment is kaved, in Hebrew meaning weighty or hard, according to the rabbis, chamura sheba chamurot, the absolute hardest of the hard. If it was easy, it wouldn't be commanded. In spirit and in deed, as individuals and as a community, we must be committed to honoring our parents. It's why, as a first step, I hope that this is a year that our community adds a social worker to our staff family for programming, for home visits, for help in navigating healthcare, to collaborate with clergy and with other agencies. We have much work to do as a community. But the real question, the question that Heschel spoke of, is not about physical sustenance, but spiritual, not about giving materially, but about giving meaning. There's another word used in reference to filial obligation, and that is yirah, meaning to revere, as these yamim noraim, these days of reverence or awe. Ish imo ve'aviv tira'u, a person shall revere his mother and father. And here what is clear is that of utmost concern to the rabbis was not who was going to foot the bill or how to keep a rebellious kid in line, but making sure that children in the prime of their lives attend to the dignity and spiritual well-being of the prior generation. What does it mean to revere one's parents? To revere one's parents is to affirm purpose in the face of the fear of being purposeless. Reverence is attitudinal, not material. It involves being patient. It requires extending honor. It demands providing dignity. Reverence begins with gratitude. Gratitude to the people who brought us into the world, who shaped us as human beings, who provided for us, who put our needs before their own, who sat at our bedsides even as we now sit at theirs. Reverence involves letting things go, forgiving frequently and freely, keeping our mouths shut, setting our egos aside, subsuming our own wants for a person to whom we can never repay. Reverence calls on us to concede that we do not know everything about everything, that there is much we can learn from someone who is rich in experience, experienced in failure, and advanced in years. The greatest gift that you can give to another person is to ask them for their opinion. Reverence reminds us of the importance of hugs, the importance of staying connected, of nurturing intergenerational dialogue, even when, perhaps especially when, that dialogue is one-directional. Reverence calls on us to realize that there was a time when our parents were our age, and one day, please God, we will be theirs. People might get older, but the image of God, as Heschel taught, remains constant. To revere one's parents means that we treat each and every day that we inhabit this world with our parents as a gift, as an opportunity to imbue their lives and our own lives with significance. Reverence reminds us that holding on and letting go, painful as it may be, are acts of love, part of life, and can go hand in hand. Reverence for parents, mind you, has nothing to do with whether our parents are living or deceased. Each one of us is created in our parents' image. Our values, priorities, and commitments, a reflection, extension, and sometimes reaction to theirs. Today is Yom Kippur, as good a day as any to assess our reverence for those who came before. So I put it to you, have you stepped up to live in the image of your parents? Are you taking your rightful place in your family, in your community, in this congregation? Or are you riding the coattails of those who preceded you? I can think of no greater way to give a parent purpose, presently or posthumously, than to instantiate their concerns and commitments beyond their length of years. I can think of no better way to demonstrate reverence for a parent than by living, aspiring towards the very high ideals of those who came before. What does reverence for a parent look like? The Bible provides us with the aspirational image of an aging olive tree surrounded by the saplings it has seeded. Banecha keshtulei zitim, your children shall be like olive saplings. In other words, a person should live to see the fruit of their labors and their children surrounding them, protecting them from the elements, providing them shade, honoring them and revering them, even as new saplings are being planted. With all due respect to Mark Twain, if we as a society, as a congregation, as sons and daughters do our jobs right, a deeply fulfilling part of life could be towards its end. Every day, a Jew is instructed to recite the Shema aloud, our central declaration of faith, and then, beneath our breath, we whisper, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Ba'ed. Blessed be the name of God who reigns for eternity. One day a year, today, Yom Kippur, as we just did, we say those hushed words out loud as well. Why do we do so? The Talmud explains that our patriarch Jacob, when he was renamed Israel and went down as noted to Egypt to be reunited with his sons, his greatest fear was that God's call to his grandfather Abraham, to his father Isaac, would come to an end with his passing. Israel saw that his grandchildren were living outside the promised land. He saw that they looked like Egyptians. He heard them speaking a foreign tongue. Who could blame him for fearing that his life work was all for naught? His love of land, his love of God, his love of the Jewish people, all coming to an end. Al tashlicheni, do not cast me off, we imagine him thinking as his family drew near. And it was there, at that moment, on his deathbed, as his soul was being placed in God's care, that his children, his grandchildren, and perhaps even his great-grandchildren stood at his side and affirmed, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. Your God is our God, Hashem Elokeinu, God is one, Hashem Echad. As if to say, Dad, we get it. We got this. The things that you live for your whole life, not only are we grateful, but we promise they will extend well beyond your lifetime. In fact, they're already being lived by your children and your grandchildren. How do we know? Because you made it so. And with that, the great patriarch closed his eyes, crossed that narrow bridge, touched eternity, and with his final breath, said aloud, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Ba'ed. Blessed be the name of God, who reigns for eternity. Today is Yom Kippur. Today we name the shared fear of being cast aside. We gather in synagogue on this sacred day just as Jacob's children gathered at his bedside. The test is one and the same. Will we honor those who came before? Will we revere them? Will we affirm the commitments of their lives in our own? Are they assured that their values will extend beyond their length of years? The answer to all these questions are in our hands. May we step up to the calling of this sacred day, giving meaning and purpose to those who gave us life, giving meaning and purpose to our own lives, and giving meaning and purpose to the lives of the generations to come. Shana Tova. The ark is opened. We're on page 223, 223, Yale.
יעלה תחנוננו מערב, ויבוא שבתנו מבוקר, ויראה רינוננו עד ערב. יעלה קולנו מערב, ויבוא צדקתנו מבוקר, ויראה פדיוננו עד ערב. יעלה עינוינו מערב, ויבוא סליחתנו מבוקר, ויראה ונאה נקתנו עד ערב, יעלה ונוסנו מערב, ויבוא למענו מבוקר, ויראה כיפורנו עד ערב. יעלה אישנו מערב, ויבוא טהורנו מבוקר, ויראה חינוננו עד ערב. יעלה זיכרוננו מערב, ויבוא ויהודנו מבוקר, ויראה הדרתנו עד ערב. יעלה דופקנו מערב, ויבוא גילנו מבוקר, ויראה בקשתנו עד ערב.
We may be seated as the ark is closed. Haneshama Lach can be found in our Machzor on page 225.
הנשמה לך והגוף פה לך, וסלם לך. הנשמה לך והגוף שלך, אדוני יעשה למען שמך. עתנו על שמך אדוני יעשה למען שמך. בעבור כבוד שמך, כי אל חנון ורחום שמך. למען שמך אדוני, וסלחת לעווננו, כי רב הוא.
The cantor just chanted on 225, Hanashama lach ve'aguf palach. It's a distinction that's made between the body and the soul. The neshama, the soul, and the guf, which is God's creation. So the idea that Jews have a body that is corporal, but a soul which is heavenly, is a concept that goes back to a story that's told by the rabbis that back in the very first verses of the Torah, it says, Naseh Adam betzalmenu kidmutenu. Let us make man in our image. But to whom is God speaking at this time? What? To the angels. So one option is the angels, that there was a celestial retinue that God was speaking to. It's like the cantor with a big choir around. Are any other options? Maybe that some think that there might have been other gods at the time, and God was speaking to other gods. But one of the explanations from the Midrash that Rabbi Harold Kushner brings to the fore, that who was the only one around at the time? The animals. Kind of Dr. Dolittle moment. And so when God was saying, let us create, the creation of human beings had an aspect of God and an aspect of the animals, which is what we are. And that idea is right here with Neshama lach ve'aguf palach. And then, if you look on page 227, Ki hine kachomer, that we are the creation, the physicalness of God's creation, but we are given free will, which is our yetzer. Our yetzer is our ability, sometimes used for good and sometimes used for bad, as if to say, God, you created us, but you gave us this yetzer. You gave us this ability to make choices. We've used it well sometimes. We've used it poorly sometimes. Hopefully, you'll look at the covenant and remember the covenant supersedes whatever our shortcomings have been. We're on page 227, Ki hine kachomer.
Ki hine kachomer beyad hayotzer. פרש. כי הנה כזה חוכית ביד המזגג. כן אנחנו בידך מוכל זדון ושוגג. כי הנה ככסף ביד הצורך. כן אנחנו בידך ממציא למזור טרף. כי הנה כחומר ביד היוצר, ברצותו מרחיב וברצותו מקצר. לברית הבט ואל תפן ליצר.
God, sovereign, who sits on a throne of mercy, acting with unbounded grace, forgiving the sins of your people one by one as each comes before you, generously forgiving sinners and pardoning transgressors, acting charitably with every living thing, do not repay them for their misdeeds. We are on page 229. 229, I invite you to please rise as the ark is opened as we approach the middle of the page.
הורית לנו לומר 13, זכור לנו היום ברית 13, כי הודעת לעניו מקדם כמו שכתוב, וירד אדוני בענן, ויתייצב עמו שם, ויקרא בשם אדוני, ויעבור אדוני על פניו, ויקרא אדוני, אדוני, אל רחום וחנון. נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע. וסלחת לעווננו וחטאתנו ונחלתנו.
We may be seated. The middle of page 232, Slach Lanu. So, Cantor, we're about to arrive at the very prayer that I was mentioning, and I think, do we have a Daniel here? Now, Daniel, not to put you on the spot, but of the 4 Schwartz kids, who's going to take care of the parents when they're older? What? Jonathan. All right, so Daniel, you go sit down. Yonatan, you come up here. And does everyone agree that Yonatan is the one?
He sits right here, and he's telling me that his brother will take care
Yeah,
of
I
me.
know. I know, yet he gets a solo right now. All right, well, parenting's tough. Just wait till they're older. All right, so, but it is interesting how I'm going to connect this to Shema Kolenu, I don't yet know. But what we're actually going to do is a generational passing of the baton here, because it's not only, there's a traditional Shema Kolenu that the cantor is going to chant, a beloved melody by Max Helfman, one of the great composers of the last century. He was here at Park Avenue for, I think, between 43 and 53. He was here. Some of the melodies we do, the Aleinu and otherwise, are all Helfman melodies. And yet I believe we're going to precede it with a melody by one of the great Mizrahi Israeli artists. Also, it's called Yimale Fi, but it will transition into Shema Kolenu. And Avihu Medina, who composed it, he just won this year, actually, the Israel Prize, which is the highest prize in Israel for musical contributions to Israeli culture. He's composed over 400 Mizrahi melodies, and he's probably the best known of the Mizrahi composers, and his family originally coming to Israel by way of Yemen. And I just bring this up because of all of the gifts of Cantor Schwartz, of all of the vision that we have for what Park Avenue is trying to accomplish musically, one of them is to build bridges from the classics to melodies that you've never heard before, from the traditional Ashkenazish melodies with which we may have been raised, and to see the transformations of that music into contemporary Israeli nusach right now. And so it's not just for nothing that we're doing this, it's actually so you can see these transformations, these generational transformations happening by way of music right here on the Bima. So if I'm not mistaken, Daniel, it's a great pleasure to call on you to chant the Mizrahi melody first, composed by Avihu Medina, and then we'll pause, we'll open the ark, and we'll chant Shema Kolenu.
תשליכני לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחי, אל תעזבני, ככלות כוחי, אל תעזבני. אל תעזבני. ככלות כוחי, אל תעזבני. ככלות כוחי, אל
Shkach. Page 233, if you're able, I invite you to please rise. The ark is opened. Shema Kolenu. השיבנו אדוני אליך, השיבנו אליך ונשובה. חדש ימינו, ימינו כקדם. אל תשליכנו. אל תשליכנו. לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו. Adonai Eloheinu
ברחמים, ברחמים, וברצון,
We may be seated as the ark is closed. Our God and God of our ancestors, do not abandon us, do not forsake us, do not shame us, do not annul your covenant with us, draw us close to your Torah, teach us your mitzvot, show us your ways, open our hearts to revere your name, to love you, to turn to you faithfully with a perfect heart, as befits your name, pardon and forgive our sins, as the psalmist wrote, for the sake of your own name, forgive our sins, though it may be great. We're on page 234, Ki anu amecha.
כי אנו עמך ואתה אלוהינו. אנו עבדיך ואתה אדוננו. אנו נחלתך ואתה גורלנו. אנו חרמך ואתה נותרנו. אנו רעייתך ואתה דודנו. אנו עמך ואתה מלכנו. אנו עזי פנים ואתה רחום וחנון, אנו כשיורף ואתה ערך אפיים, אנו מלאי עוון ואתה מלא רחמים. אנו ימינו כצל עובר ואתה הוא שנותיך לא יתאמנו. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, תבוא לפניך תפילתנו ואל תתעלם מתחינתנו, שיהננו עזי פנים וקשי עורף. לומר לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו, אבל אנחנו ואבותינו ואמותינו חטאנו. איי 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 אשמנו, בגדנו, גזלנו, דיברנו דופי, הבינו והרשענו, זדנו, חמסנו, טפלנו שקר. איי 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 יצנו רע, כיזבנו, לצנו, מרדנו, יצנו, שררנו, פשענו, צררנו, קישינו הורש, איי איי איי, רשענו, שיחתנו, תייבנו, טעינו, תיטענו.
Continuing on 235. We have done wrong and transgressed, so we have not triumphed. Inspire our hearts to abandon the path of evil. Hasten our redemption. And so your prophet Isaiah declared, let the wicked forsake their path and sinful their design. Let them return to God, who will show them compassion. Let them return to our God, who will surely forgive them.
אתה יודע רזי עולם, ותעלומות סתרי כל חי, אתה חופש כל חדרי בטן, ובוחן כליות ולב. אין דבר נעלם ממך, ואין נסתר מנגד עיניך. ובכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, שתסלח לנו על כל עוונותינו, ותמחה לנו על כל עוונות חטאותינו, ותכפר לנו על כל פשענו.
So in just a moment, we're on 237, Al Chet, where we will confess our sins, see how we hold up in the year that went by. One of the great joys of my life is that I text with my three brothers in California about nonsense, really, all the time. And my brother sent me a text about a big change that happened this past week from California in California, state law, which is probably only interesting to me. What are some of the primary differences between California and New York City? Number one, in New York City, you cannot make a right turn on a red. But in LA, you can make a right turn on the red. And in LA, you will get ticketed for jaywalking. In New York, I've never seen a person get ticketed has anyone here ever gotten a ticket for jaywalking in New York? In LA, see? And you were walking this earth thinking, grew up in Manhattan. Of course, you can jaywalk, but there you go. Now, what's interesting is that law was changed this past week. Now you're allowed to jaywalk in Los Angeles. Well, there you go. But it raises, I don't know what sort of question it raises. It raises an interesting question about mens rea, about intentionality, and what if you say, can you tell a policeman that you were from New York, and will they let you off, and all sorts of interesting legal questions. But it's also this question about how laws change, right? One thing, I've gone through my whole life thinking jaywalking is a crime. And now all of a sudden, I'm going to have a party next time I'm in LA. And who knows, maybe next year the turn on a red light law will change, just like the cannabis law changed in New York. All sorts of things. We live in a crazy world. And laws come and laws go. And there's all sorts of distinctions of which laws can come and which laws can go. Spinoza had a famous distinction between ceremonial law and divine law. Legal theorists talk about positive law versus natural law. My sister-in-law, no, she's actually a lawyer. She's a law professor, but she's here. She could probably speak about this with far more sophistication. But when we come to Al Chet, right, it's very important. And then when we stand up, right, it's as if we are all coming together and saying, certain laws come and certain laws go. But the prayer book here is exactly the same as it was last year. And we are going to read these laws about deceit, about that which is forbidden, about violence, about foul speech, about the impulse to evil, these are eternal laws. These are not laws that come and go like the wind, and they become our compass. They become our centering device, and we strike our chests knowing that we as a community might be guilty of them. And if we are, this is our chance to self-correct, to ask for forgiveness, and to look to the year ahead, hoping that we can look at this list knowing that we have stood purely before God. I invite you to please rise. We're on page 237, Al Chet.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך באונס וברצון, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך באימוץ הלב. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביודעים ובלא יודעים, ועל כולם סלח לנו כפר לנו על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכחש ובכזב ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכפת שוכח.
We have sinned against you in everyday conversation. We've sinned against you through conspiratorial glances. We've sinned against you through condescension. And we've sinned against you through stubbornness.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעיניים רמות, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעזות מצח, ועל כולם סלח לנו מחלנו מחלנו על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפריקת עול ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בפלילות על חטא שחטאנו לפניך.
We have sinned against you through empty promises. We've sinned against you through baseless hatred. We've sinned against you by betraying trust. We've sinned against you by succumbing to confusion.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתשומת יד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בתימהון לבב, ועל כולם אלוה הסליחות סלח לנו כפר לנו.
We may be seated. Normally at this time, we would just skip over and look to Avinu Malkeinu, but I feel that it's incumbent upon us to pause because though the tasks of the day call on us to do the soul work that Yom Kippur asks of us, it's also incumbent upon us to never be an island separated from the hurts of the world. On page 240, we look at Misha'ana la Sarah Imenu, look, just as all of these figures, Sarah, Abraham, Isaac, all the way through Jewish history, that individual Jews and community of Jews have been in tense moments. We know that our moment right now is no different. And I'm speaking specifically about the Russian Jewish community at this time. Many of us saw that the Israeli government approved on Sunday, this was in the papers, a proposal to expedite the immigration of Russians who qualify under the law of return to come back to Israel. Amy Bressman, our past chairman, will address us tomorrow and talk about the important work of UJA Federation and the Jewish Agency in these efforts. Because of what's going on, alongside the previous waves of immigration from Ukraine, the Israeli government has allocated some 90 million shekels as needed towards help resettle communities of the former Soviet Union. It is a time that we call on God to help our people who are seeking safety and refuge at this time. People are trying to get out, and it is a time that we recognize our obligations to those who are doing the work of God's hands, to the JDC, to the Jewish Agency for Israel, who are resettling so many people seeking as such right now. So when we rise for Misha'ana, I'll share with you in between the verses various facts that you may not know that hopefully will impel us forward in our commitment towards the community of the Jewish community of Russia. Please rise, Misha'ana, on page 240.
משענה לשרה אמנו בזקנתה יוסי, הוא יעננו. משענה לאברהם אבינו בהר המוריה, הוא יעננו.
2022 is the highest year in Aliyah in 20 years due to the war in Ukraine. Israel has welcomed some 60,000 immigrants.
משענה ליצחק בנם כשנעקד על גבי המזבח, הוא יעננו. משענה לרבקה בהריונה, הוא יעננו.
There are record numbers of Aliyah from Russia. Thus far, 24,000. Combine the eligible Aliyah numbers from Russia and Ukraine could be as high as 800,000.
משענה ליעקב בבית אל, הוא יעננו. משענה ללאה בעוניה,
Approximately 70,000 Russian Jews and Russians eligible to immigrate according to Israel's law of return are currently living in poverty in countries neighboring Russia and Ukraine.
משענה לרחל בעצבונה, הוא יעננו. משענה ליוסף בבית האסורים,
Direct flights from Russia to Israel were canceled with the start of the Ukraine war. Aliyah is being facilitated from neighboring countries. The Jewish Agency has purchased 15,000 additional airline seats for the remainder of the year, reimbursing any traveler from Russia to Israel with the intention of immigration of Aliyah. The Jewish Agency reports that to date, they have been able to support all the requests for Aliyah coming from Russia.
משענה למילדות העבריות על האובניים, הוא יעננו. משענה ליוכבד על שפת היאור, הוא יעננו.
Despite the large numbers that are leaving, the Jewish communities and organizations in Russia are seeing an increase in participation. Families know that in Jewish education they find meaning and safety.
משענה לאבותינו לאמותינו על ים סוף, משענה למשה בחורב.
And finally, the Jewish Agency stands committed to support Jewish life in Russia at this time, to assist those who wish to leave and to do so and find safety in the state of Israel.
משענה למרים ביברה, הוא יעננו. משענה לארון במחתה, הוא יעננו. משענה לפנחס בקומו מתוך העדה, הוא יעננו. משענה, הוא יעננו.
We remain standing. The ark is opened. Avinu Malkeinu, page 243.
אבינו מלכנו, שמע קולנו. אבינו מלכנו, חטאנו לפניך. אבינו מלכנו, חמול עלינו. ועלול עלינו ותאפנו. ועלינו, אבינו מלכנו, קל דבר וחרב רב לעלינו, אבינו מלכנו, שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו. אבינו מלכנו, שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו, אבינו מלכנו, שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו, אבינו מלכנו, שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו, שמע קולנו.
Ascribe us for good in the book of life. Avinu Malkeinu, ascribe us in the book of redemption. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of sustenance. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of merit. Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness. Avinu Malkeinu, have mercy on us. Answer us, for our deeds are insufficient. Deal with us charitably and lovingly, and redeem us.
אבינו מלכנו, חוננו בנינו, אבינו מלכנו, חוננו בנינו, כי הן בנו מעשים, עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד, עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד והושיענו. אבינו מלכנו, חוננו בנינו, אבינו מלכנו, חוננו בנינו, כי אין בנו מעשים, עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד, עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד והושיענו. אבינו מלכנו, חוננו בנינו, אבינו מלכנו, חוננו בנינו, כי אין בנו מעשים,
The ark is closed. We may be seated. Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא יברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי בכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואימרו אמן אמן שם רבה מרבה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודש הבריחו לילה לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמא ואימרו אמן תתקבל צלות הון ובאות הון בכל בית ישראל קודם עבורון בבשמיא ואימרו אמן יהי של אמר הבא מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואימרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואימרו ואימרו ואימרו
Page 200. You still have anything in the tank? We got all day tomorrow, too. So, page 246, once again, if you're able, I invite you to please rise. The ark is opened.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר ראשית, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל העולם, ואנחנו משתחווים ומודים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ ומושב וקרוב השמיים עמם כי המלכות שלך היא לעולמי תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל
If you are mourning, observing the yahrzeit of a loved one, I ask you to remain standing, otherwise you may be seated. Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 247. Page 247, Mourner's Kaddish. Yit kadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah, be'alma divrach yerutei be'amlich malchutei, be'chayechon u'vyomechon u'vchayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam olmei olmaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. Vit hadar, vit aleh, vit alal, shemei dekudasha brichu. Le'ela, mikol berchata v'shirata. Tush bechata v'nechemata, d'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru amen. May God, who ordains harmony in the universe, grant peace to us, to Israel, to all of humanity, and let us all say, Amen. You may be seated. Good Yontiv, everyone. It's wonderful to see the sanctuary filled, to see people here, and I wish everyone an easy fast, in Hebrew, a som kal, that you should have a day with us today, tomorrow, all the way through, and we look forward to all being together throughout Yom Kippur. I want to thank Cantor Schwartz for leading our services so beautifully this evening. I want to thank David Enlow and the choir for making sure everything sounds so beautiful and is so beautiful, to all of our technical team in security, in the sound and AV, the professionals who make it all possible. We thank you. I want to thank all our ushers who have been greeting people so warmly, as well as, of course, Ross Abelow, who is making sure everything runs smoothly as it is. I want to acknowledge on the Bima leaders of our community, to Andrew Siegel. We wish you and your family a good, sweet year. And to Lizzie Marcus, to our president, we thank you and wish you a good, sweet, health-filled year, as well as your family. I want to remind everyone that tomorrow morning, Shachrit services and the family services will begin at 8:30 a.m. So all the services will daven Shachrit in here in this room. Are you sure? Okay. Like I said, we are all going to be in the third floor, but just ask someone at the door. That will be. But the family service is going to be downstairs, and then at 9:30 or thereabouts, 9:40, we are going to begin with the Hotzat HaTorah in the various locations here in the sanctuary, and as well as, of course, all the other places. Please bring your high holiday tickets to all high holiday services, not only because you need them to get in, because the rabbi has no idea where to direct you, and so better that you look at your ticket and find out. Directly following Yizkor, as has become our tradition, it's a great pleasure that we're going to hear and be in dialogue with Dr. Richard Haas, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, for our annual conversation about current global issues. That's going to be here in the sanctuary as well as online. All members are welcome to the 87th Street Sanctuary for the dialogue. Dr. Haas, I wish it were the case that we could give you the year off, that there's nothing going on in the world and we just all, have a poetry slam. But unfortunately, there are real things to talk about. And so we'll look to that, as well as we are going to the first 8 minutes of that. We are going to have the Yanover family from Ukraine who were able to escape the Russian invasion. That family will be in our community during the break tomorrow, making their rounds around New York synagogues, and so they will share their experience for a few minutes with us about that. Everything else, I encourage you to look up and to see what is going on in the fall in the community. I want to, it was interesting to give a sermon about aging because there are so many Jewish jokes. And I was just kind of like, which ones do I pick? One that I did not pick for my sermon was, the story of Sadie and Abe, and it's Abe's, final minutes on this earth. And he says, Sadie, come to my bedside. And he says, Sadie, when we were in the shtetl and the Cossacks came and they burned down the village, where were you, Sadie? And Sadie says, I was right there at your side, Abe. And then, Sadie, when we came over on the boat, and that terrible voyage, weeks on end, the hull of the ship, nothing to our name but the clothes on our back, where were you, Sadie? Abe, I was right at your side, right at your side. And then when we arrived in America, and I was working double shifts in the factory, breaking my back, scraping to make a living, and then the IRS took it all away. Where were you, Sadie? Abe, I was at your side. And Abe leans over and says, you know what, Sadie? I think you bring me bad luck. All right, you want one more? Yeah. You're not going, what are you going to do? Like, you can't go anywhere. So the man who goes to the rabbi, I have a strong desire to live to eternity. He says, what am I supposed to do? And the rabbi says, well, get married. And he says, it's that simple? I'm going to live forever? And he says, no, but the desire will disappear. You know, I'll tell you an old one. No. You know, Jed, the trick to life is ending 5 minutes early, not 5 minutes late. Like, we want people to come back. All right, so one more? All right, this is an old one. All right, the rabbi is making the visit to the senior citizens' home, and he walks into each home one after one after one, and he goes into, you know, Mrs. Schwartz's room, who's just turned 80, and says, Mrs. Schwartz, how you doing? She says, I'm doing great. He says, that's great. May you live to 120. Goes to Mrs. Cohen's room. The rabbi says, Mrs. Cohen, how you doing? Mrs. Cohen's just turned 100. Says, Mrs. Cohen, may you live to 120. Goes to Mrs. Goldstein's room. Mrs. Goldstein's just turned 120. The rabbi says, Miss Goldstein, have a great day. All right. And with that, come back tomorrow. Maybe if we can make God laugh, God will have mercy. I think we have something special in honor of not just Yigdal concluding our service, but I think this is a British melody, a British composition of Yigdal. We're all thinking of the Queen, and page 250 will conclude our service with Yigdal.
יגדל אלוהים החי וישתבח ממצב עינת אל מציאותו. אין עלה דמות הגוף ואין לו גוף, לא נערוך אליו קדושתו. השרת